Welcome to the Mary Hyatt Show. I have a fabulous show planned for you today. I'm super excited to jump into the content for today's show, but maybe this is your first time. Maybe you have never been on one of my shows, and I just want to take a quick second to welcome you. You are absolutely in the right place. I'm so happy to have you here in the middle of August. It's just been crazy. I think for people in Nashville, where I am from, a lot of kids are going back to school already, which means that I think summer is, officially, non-officially over. And so today I decided to wear my little Hawaiian shirt in honor of the end of summer and the beginning of fall, which I absolutely love fall. But my name is Mary Hyatt. I am your show host, and I am a life coach, an entrepreneur, and a presidential diamond with doTERRA essential oils. And my heart, my passion, my desire, what gets me up in the morning and gets me excited is helping women to wake up, to find their voice, and to become fully alive. So in this show, you're going to see a lot of conversations around vulnerability, a lot of conversations around authenticity. And right now, I'm then really obsessed about body and how we can learn to quiet that inner bully and really make peace with the mirror, representing all different kinds of body diversity, shapes and sizes and colors, and really feel comfortable in our own skin. So I also want to encourage you guys, if you haven't downloaded my free ebook, the Love Your Body Affirmation Cheat Sheet, make sure to do that for sure. So the link for that is in this video description. So just click on the link, put in your information, and you will get this free step-by-step PDF download that explains how to create affirmations that will allow you to change that dialogue inside of your mind from disgust and hate and shame to one that is loving and accepting and really encouraging to see yourself as worthy of love and belonging. But before we get into the actual content, let's start the show. All right, well, let's hop straight into it. I have been dying to talk about identity. I've been dying to talk about this whole concept because I was recently on a trip to Italy. Now, let me just pause first and say, for those of you, if this is your first Facebook Live show with me, I hope that you will grab a pen and a paper or have your phone ready to go, because this is going to be kind of a workshop style, and get engaged in the comments. I can finally see them. Thank you guys. For whatever reason we were delayed, but I can see that Joan is here, Elaine is here, Barbara is here, Rebecca is here. So awesome to have you guys. So comment, share, like on this post, give me some hearts, give me some thumbs up as we go through this content, which will make it so much more fun to participate together when there is an awesome dialogue. But I was recently in Italy, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this at all, where maybe you travel to a new place. Certainly when you go outside of the country, you sort of walk around and you realize that all of a sudden you have basically no identity, that you are unknown to that area where you're traveling, and no one knows where you live, no one knows what your job is, no one knows if you're single, no one knows if you're married, no one knows if you struggle with anxiety or whether you love your body or not, or what gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited. No one has any clue whether you are rich, whether you are poor. And what I experienced in Italy was like, I'm a nobody here, which for somebody like me who lives in the same town that I grew up in, that is really bizarre, because I feel like around Nashville, I can't go to a coffee shop without running into somebody that I know. And the cool thing about that, like when I was in Italy, I had the ability to just take a quick pause and kind of think through my identity, think through who I described myself as. What did that look like? How did I define myself? And I thought, okay, well, whether or not you've been on vacation recently or you went somewhere for the summer, maybe you don't have any trips coming up, I thought I would try to figure out if we could sort of create that same experience here over Facebook Live so that you had an opportunity to slow down and to think about your identity. But before we kind of get into the workshop exercise part of it, let's sort of look at what is your identity. So I really think identity is crucial. I think it's so important to slow down and figure out how we define ourselves. And obviously, when you think about identity, you think about your age, maybe your gender, your race, your height, your eye color, your family of origin. You know, all of those things sort of make up part of your identity. Like for me, I'm a 31-year-old, 5'6", American, Caucasian, female, woman with green eyes, who is the daughter of Michael and Gail Hyatt. You know, that is a part of my identity, but it's part of my identity that I can't change. That's just solid. That is there to stay. I'm not going to be able to change that. And so we're not going to really mess with that today. I want to really get into the part of our identities that are a little bit more subjective, a little bit more malleable, and figure out if it is actually working for us or not. And to me, if we kind of stretch out this idea of identity, this is going to include things like our unique skills, our unique abilities, our body type, our visions, our beliefs, our hopes, our dreams, our occupation, our hobby, sort of what makes up the totality of who we are. And to me, there is who we are, and there's also the perception of who people think we are. So we have sort of our own identity, and then we sort of have this collective universal identity where people see us in a certain light or in a certain way. And the interesting thing about identity is that it can often feel like we're wearing a lot of masks. Like to me, there is that innate identity, who we are at our core, what we know to be true about ourselves, but most of us are running around with all different kinds of masks that we're putting based on somebody else's expectation of who they think we should be. And so we adopt these different masks. And all of a sudden we wake up in our 30s and 40s and 50s or 60s and we go, is this even really who I am? Is this even who I really want to be at the end of the day? And we never give ourselves the opportunity to challenge that, to question it, to identify it in the first place and get clear on what it is and who it is that we say that we are. And why this is so important, you guys. And if you are kind of in that place of putting on masks, will you guys just type in a number 1 in the comment section? Julia, you said that this is exhausting, like all the masks, that's exhausting. Yeah, it really freaking is. It's so exhausting. I spent so much of my life wearing different masks before I figured out who I actually was at my core. But the reason that this is so important is because whoever we think we are, whoever we define ourselves as, is behind the driver's seat of all of our decisions. How we define ourselves is really the clearest indicator of where we are going to end up. Jesse, you said number 1, you said that this is your current struggle. There's no sense of fulfillment. Yeah, you can't have fulfillment when you're not being who you truly are. there's a false sense of this. Now, this is a quote from Tony Robbins. You guys know I have like a super crazy crush on Tony. But Tony says the most powerful force in the human psyche is people's need for their words and their actions to stay consistent with their identity, with how we define ourselves. So this is so crazy. So what is driving our entire world, our actions, our behaviors, our habits, is how we define ourselves. So if I define myself and I say, I am a mess, or I'm crazy, or I'm a bad person, or I have no self-control. Maybe you say things like, well, maybe I'm just only a mother, or I'm not adventurous, or I'm not fun, or I'm not brave, or I'm a bad speaker, I'm a terrible teacher, I'm not good on camera, I'm just not an active person, I'm a foodie, I'm simple, I'm complicated. All of these definitions of who we are, all these identities are supercharged in our mind. Like they mean something to ourselves, whether that's positive or negative. How we define ourselves is really supercharged. Betsy, you said a 1. Julia, you said a 1. Rebecca, you said a 1. Yeah, and so these statements that we make about ourselves dictate our behaviors. It's like your brain literally has no other option than to go to work to be consistent with how you've defined yourself. It goes to work to find proof that you are a bad person or a good person. It goes to work to find the proof that you are not adventurous or that you're very adventurous. It doesn't really matter if it's true or not. Your brain takes it at truth. And so it's going to go try to find all the proof to validate your sense of identity. So I used to struggle with a lot of anxiety, and I defined myself as an anxious person. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm an anxious person. I really just got into that existence as a person, as part of my identity. I was an anxious person. So I couldn't not have anxiety. If I defined myself as an anxious person, I had to have anxiety. I couldn't not be anxious if I defined myself as an anxious person. I was an anxious person because I defined myself as an anxious person. It's almost like a recipe. It's almost like it's your brain's way of taking something and then going to work to bake the cake. It's like, okay, here's the cake. I'm an anxious person. Now let's go find all the ways in which in your life we find the flour and the sugar and the eggs to create the cake of an anxious person. So basically you're saying to your brain, like, okay, brain, like, here's who we have to be when you make these statements about your identity. And we don't ever really stop to ask ourselves if we want that identity, if we want to be an anxious person. Because how we define ourselves is what we're going to experience. How we define ourselves is what dictates our behavior. So I have this little exercise that I want to share with you. So anytime that I find myself in the position where I am saying the words I am, which is a great indicator for me that I'm about to define who I am. I'm about to let everybody know what I think my identity is. So when I catch myself saying the words I am, I want to see what comes after that. And then I want to ask myself 5 questions, because I know in that moment that I am beginning to define myself. So anytime you say I am, be on the lookout for those words, I am, and then ask yourself these 5 questions. Question number 1 is this really who you are? Is this really who you are at your core? It's like, okay, if I were born, was I born a little anxious baby? No. That was learned behavior. There's a reason why I'm anxious. So I don't want that to be part of my identity. And then ask yourself the second question, how old is that identity? How old is that identity? When did I start feeling like an anxious person? When did that begin? How old is that identity? And the third question to ask yourself, and we're just challenging the ways we define ourselves, is why did you adopt that? Why did I adopt the identity of being an anxious person? Like, that's not a pleasant thing. That's not an enjoyable thing. Like, why? Like, how did that happen? Was it because I felt anxious in a certain situation because I didn't feel like I had control or power? Why did I need to develop that anxiety to cope with what was going on in my life? Why did I adopt that? Understanding why I adopted that. Or maybe somebody handed you that identity. Maybe somebody who was impactful in your life said, hey, you are such and such. You are this. You're good at this. You'll probably make a great blah, blah, blah. So why did you adopt that? Was it because somebody told you and you decided it was true? Or did you do it as a coping mechanism? Why did you adopt that? Okay, the fourth question you're going to ask yourself when you hear yourself saying, I am blank, 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 is how does it feel? How does that piece of your identity feel? Does it feel good to be an anxious person? Does it feel good to be a sick person? Does it feel good to be a poor person? Does it feel good to be a fat person? Does it feel good to be a skinny person? Does it feel good to be a mother? Does it feel good to be a father? Does it feel good to be a daughter? All of those things. How does it feel? Because it's really important. We always want to move to things that feel good. And then last, but not least, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, is do I need to update this? Is this an old piece of my identity that is like from elementary school or from when I was a little kid that really isn't true? Do I need to update this or not? And, as we develop these new beliefs of who we are, our behavior begins to change to help support a new identity. And the amazing thing about asking these questions is we realize that we have power to change it, to redefine it, to update our identity. There are some things obviously that are core to who we are, but there's a lot of things that we can adjust and that we can change. And I can remember for myself, someone told me once, they said, okay, Mary, they're like, I think this was in high school actually. They said, you are a great starter, but you're not really great at follow through. In that moment, when somebody sort of handed on a platter my identity to me as a reflection, I had the choice whether I accepted that as truth or not. Now, in that moment, I didn't realize I could adopt that identity or I could reject that identity. I thought whatever somebody told me had to be true. And so I just sort of, early on in my life began to take on all these different pieces of my identity that weren't necessarily who I was. So for years, I did not develop any kind of discipline to see something through to the end, because in my mind, I had identified and defined myself as somebody who wasn't good at follow through. And then one day I kind of woke up to that. I had somebody in my life challenge me and they were like, you need to finish what you started. You need to actually complete something. And so I was like, okay, I need to update this part of my identity, and I can still say yes, I am a great starter. I'm a quick start. I love to start new projects, but I'm also somebody who completes things. And I wanted to have the new identity that I take my projects and my ideas all the way to the bank, all the way to the end, which ultimately changed my behavior. When I changed and updated my identity, it changed my actions. All of a sudden, I learned how to be disciplined, which is like a fabulous quality to have. I learned how to be disciplined. I learned how to show up after the initial excitement. I learned how to lean into discomfort when stuff got really hard. I didn't just say, well, I'm a good starter and I'm out of here. I was I had to lean into it. And all of that shift allowed me to be really financially successful in my life. And so that's what's amazing about our identity is it does dictate our actions. So if you're beginning to see how this is working in your own life, how a certain way in which you've defined yourself is dictating your actions, are you starting to kind of put those pieces together? If you have an example maybe of okay, because I've identified myself as a terrible speaker, I never get up in front of people and I avoid teaching classes, let's say if you're in doTERRA, or if you've identified yourself as somebody who is lazy, then your actions are you sleep until noon every day. Can anybody give me an example of that? I would love to hear from you how you're kind of drawing this arc between the two, identity and to your behavior. It's really, really fascinating. Someone in my past, this is kind of interesting. This is another one for me just to share with you how this has shown up in my own life. Somebody for me when I was really little said that all of the girls in my family were little chiefs. I have 4 sisters. We're all very independent. We're all entrepreneurs. None of us graduated college. And as a little girl, I internalized that as a very shameful thing. I was too strong. My voice was too powerful. I didn't want that identity. I did not want to be a little chief because that was a negative thing in my mind. And that was honestly something that I spent years trying to reverse. And along the way of trying to reverse that identity that somebody handed to me, I lost my power. I let my light diminish. And by resisting that identity, by somebody, kind of putting shame on who I truly was, I fell asleep to myself. I started to avoid who I really was because in my mind, that was not a good thing. In my mind, that was negative. In my mind, to be real, to be the real Mary Hyatt meant that I couldn't be loved and accepted. So what happens? I put on this mask, and I put on this mask, and I put on this mask, and I put on this mask, kind of like a chameleon, as a way to just cope with, okay, well, I'll just be whoever you want me to be then, because I don't know who I am isn't safe to be. And so we all kind of develop these ways of shifting our identity that really, at the end of the day, gives us the quality of our lives. That's why so many people wake up, once their kids are gone, and they look around at the empty nest and they go, well, who am I? Who am I really? Because I've been playing all these roles. I've been being what everybody else wants me to be, and I don't even really know who I am. And that's what we want to avoid. That's why I want to challenge you to really think through who you are today and decide if you need to upgrade it, if you like that version of your identity, or if some things need to change. Okay, so this is a really powerful quote, again by my heartthrob, sweet old Tony Robbins. He says, identity is this incredible invisible force that controls your whole life. It's invisible, like gravity is invisible, but it controls your entire life. And that is why we need to get really clear on what our identity is. So let's take a look at how to identify the 3 elements of your current identity. Okay, so the first element that we are going to take a look at is to identify your primary roles. So we want to get clear on, okay, who are you today? Who are you right now? What mask do you have on? What are you playing at? So what are your primary roles? That could be mother, girlfriend, partner, wife. That could be Christian, Jewish, Muslim. Maybe you are a life coach. Maybe you're a therapist. Maybe you are a wellness advocate. Name out your professional role. Maybe you're a sister. Maybe you are a daughter. Maybe you are a friend. What roles do you play in your life? I have played a lot of different roles in my life. Currently, I am a sister, I'm a daughter, I am a girlfriend, I'm a wellness advocate, I'm a life coach, I'm an entrepreneur. I could probably go on and on, but those are like the primary roles that I play on a day-to-day basis. Okay, that's going to be the first element of your identifying who you are, of your identity. So if you want to write in there what are some of the primary roles that you play, and again, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, this is a fantastic time to go ahead and to show this. And I'm going to see here if I can add in, I want to share this file with you guys. And I've never tried to do this while I have been online. So let's just see if I can do this in real time. This is the one-woman show situation. Okay, got it there. All right, so Rebecca, you said wife, mom, daughter, friend, working mom at corporation, wellness advocate with doTERRA. Great. And I'm seeing all your other comments, guys. I'm going to come back later and definitely answer these. But how can you identify your primary role? That is the first element to your current identity. All right, so as you're thinking about that, now we're going to go to the second element. And this is going to be how to identify your personality. So the first piece were your roles. Now we're going to look at your personality. Now, personality is kind of fun. I had to say I'm a little bit obsessed with personality. I love personality tests. I take them all the time. This is just fun for me to think about my personality as it relates to my identity. So you might be outgoing. You might be introverted. You might be energetic. You might be lively. You might be reserved. You might be cautious. You might be excitable. You might be determined, you might be ambitious, you might be compassionate. And when I asked you guys on my little teaser video for this show, I said, okay, describe yourself in one word. Everybody put a descriptive word that related to their personality. And so they were saying that I was honest or I was friendly. And those are elements of your personality. So that's not the whole of who you are, but that's a part of your identity. Your personality. You know, how would you describe your personality? So as we're looking at these three elements of what make up your current identity, we're going to have the roles that you play. We're going to have your personality. And the third piece, the third element of this is we want to identify our habits. Our habits also are part of our identity. And this is where you're going to see oftentimes a lot of those I am statements. A lot of those ways where you say, I am an early riser, or I am a foodie, or I'm always late, or I am obsessed with time, or I love old cars. I am somebody who loves to work out. I am a surfer. You know, there are going to be sort of habits and interests that you have out there in the world that define who you are, that make up who you are. Like, my interests, my habits are unique to me. That makes up my identity. So that is the third element. So if you were writing this out with your pen and paper, jot down a few of your habits, a few of your interests, so that you really get clear on the three elements that help you really identify who you are. Your current identity. What are your primary roles? What is your personality? And what are some of your habits and your interests? That makes up you. That makes up you. That makes up me. And that is my identity. Now, here is the big question. Once we have gotten really clear on assessing, taking inventory of who we are, then we have to ask ourselves the big question, which is, do you want to upgrade any of those? Do you want to upgrade any of your roles, any of your personality, any of your habits or interests? Do you want to upgrade any of that? Is your identity, how you define yourself today, giving you what you want? So I used to identify myself as an anxious person. I was sick because I had endometriosis. So I told everybody that I had endometriosis. Well, I have endometriosis. I have endometriosis. Well, my body can't not have endometriosis if I'm constantly saying I have endometriosis. So I literally stopped saying those words. Now, my body was still experiencing that, but I stopped saying it because I didn't want to affirm that over and over again. And so I shifted it and I said, my body is healing and coming back into emotional and hormonal balance. So I was saying I was anxious, I was sick, I was fat, I was a foodie, I didn't have very much money, I wasn't great at follow through. So you can see when all of those pieces add up to be Mary is a very unhappy person. Mary is a very miserable person. all of Mary's actions to be anxious and sick and lazy and overweight and hurting and in pain and emotionally distraught, all of the actions that have to validate that part of my identity were, like Julia, what you said earlier today, were exhausting. We're absolutely exhausting. So my identity wasn't working for me. It wasn't giving me what I really wanted. If I slowed down and was really honest, what I wanted was to feel full of life. I wanted to feel healthy. I wanted to feel vitality. I wanted to feel energy. And the way in which I was identifying myself was, in a sense, keeping me from being any of those things. So is it time for an upgrade? Is your identity actually giving you what you really want? How does it feel to exist inside of your identity today? How does it feel? Is there any part of that you would want to change? Or is there any part of that isn't true to who you are? That's just a mask that you go, yeah, that's not really me. That is not really me at the end of the day. Rebecca, you said that this is huge because I do the same thing with PCOS, anxiety, overweight, and adrenal fatigue. Yeah. The more we put on repeat outside, this is who I am. This is my identity. And it's what you don't want. You're not going to get what you really want because you're just affirming the identity of who you are in all of these negative experiences that you're going through. And that your life, your world, your body goes to work to find proof, to validate, and to confirm however you describe yourself. So it's kind of a wake-up call because it's like, well, gosh, I really don't want that to be true. So let's update it. Let's change it. And you get the power to do that, which is so amazing. So the goal in all of this is to show up in more of who you really are. The goal is to always let more of ourselves be seen. The goal is to kind of lay down the masks that we've been wearing for a long time that somebody has given to us or that we have thought we've had to adopt to be loved, to belong, to be accepted, and to step into the light as who we truly are. So who are you really? I love this quote from Brene Brown, even though I think that says Brent Brown, but y'all know Brene Brown, okay? She says, because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. And so we have to begin to base our identity more to the core of who we are and not let other people or society hand us or dictate our identity. We have a choice over the matter. We get to decide, we get to choose, we get to define ourselves. And after all, we're the ones that are inhabiting this identity. We're the ones that have to live inside of ourselves as who we describe ourselves to be. And so when we are out of alignment, like if this is your spine, when we are out of alignment with who we truly are, it's like your disc in your back being out of alignment. It hurts, it causes pain, it causes suffering. And we keep chasing something over here that's not really who we are. And so we show up in our relationships as a false version of who we are, which doesn't allow for intimacy, doesn't allow for vulnerability. And so the goal is to come back into alignment with who we truly are. And we get to go through and define that, to curate it, to cultivate it, and to, again, let ourselves be seen. And so my hope is that you learn how to step more inside of yourself, where you're not walking around feeling like you're a fraud or feeling like you're trying to be somebody who you are not, because that wreaks havoc on our beings. It wreaks havoc on our bodies. And so now is the time to really begin to curate who you are. So I'm going to take you through a little fun process of how to begin to do this. Step-by-step little process. For those of you who were aware of this past week was the full moon. Can I see from you guys if anybody is feeling or was feeling the energy of the full moon? I feel like it was really, really strong. It was also a lunar eclipse, but my body, I was having a hard time sleeping. I was super anxious. I was just like all over the place. So if anybody was feeling the full moon, type it in the comments. I want to know I was not alone in the crazy full moon vibes. But I put on my Insta story, I put a really cool exercise on my Insta story where I help people identify or write down their identities. And what we did is I encourage people to write it all out. I'm going to show you how to do this. And then at the end of this, to burn it, to like literally crumple up your paper and burn it. Burn that old identity. Burn the part of yourself that isn't true to who you are. So here's what we're going to do. So feel free, if you want to do this right now, go ahead and pull out a piece of paper and a pen, because you're going to want to divide your piece of paper into 3 separate columns. You're going to want to have it to where you can write different things down. You can do this now or you can do it later, but it's kind of fun if you, do it in real time, because, who's really going to go back and do it later? Okay, so here's what your paper is going to look like. So on the left side, again, you're going to do 3 sections. On the left side, write out your 5 ideal identities. And this is where you're going to say, I want to be perceived as. In the middle, you are going to write down your 5, I didn't update that. Okay, sorry. Well, all right, here we go. Okay, pretend this is not a typo. 5 unwanted identities on the bottom. And sorry, let me just see this. I'm getting my own self confused. Okay, left side, my 5 ideal. Okay, here I am. I want to be perceived as. In the middle, you're going to say, these are my 5 unshakable identities. My 5 unshakable identities. I know this will always be me. This is the true parts of who you are. And on the right side, you are going to write your 5 unwanted identities. So Team Mary Hyatt, will you put that in there for me correctly, so that everybody can see that in the comment section? I know this, I do not want to be perceived as. Okay, so I'm going to go back here so that doesn't confuse you, because I know I did a big typo. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. 5 ideal identities, your 5 unshakable identities in the middle, and your 5 unwanted identities on the other side. Because you want to get clear on how do you want to be perceived. If you could design what would make you feel the most alive, that would make you feel incredible, what would be your ideal identity? Go ahead and write that down. And if you guys want that, want to share that on the comments, I would love to see that. I think this would be so fascinating, because this is unique to each of us. Even if you have one that you can think of right now, maybe you go back later and you put in your 5. Will you guys write that in the comment section? What's maybe just one ideal identity? Like for me, some of the things that I wanted my identity to include was, I want to be all about ease. I wanted to be a person who was fully turned on for life. I wanted to be radiant. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be wealthy. These are part of my identity that I wanted to say, Carrie, I love this. You said you want to be a role model. Yes, love, love, love that. So what is an ideal identity? The second piece in the middle, and this is where you get to anchor into the alignment of your true identity, okay? What are those unshakable things about yourself? What's your unshakable identity? Like, I know my unshakable identity. I don't care where I am, what I'm doing, what stage of life I am. I know that I am a powerhouse. That is part of my unshakable identity. That will not change. That will not alter. I am a powerhouse. I also know that part of my identity that is literally core to who I am is that I am the least judgmental person you will ever meet. I also know that part of my unshakable identity in the middle of your paper for me is that I am courageous and I am resilient. Okay, so those are part of my identities that I know it doesn't matter what is happening in life. I know that is who I am. So we've got your ideal, we've got your unshakable, and the last side of your piece of paper is going to be unwanted. What part of your identity is something that you don't want? Something that you're like, all right, it's time to update. Let's get rid of it. Let's throw it away. And I got to just give a little shout out to my girl, Carissa. Hey, girl. Miss you. Love you. Okay, so what is an unwanted part of your personality? I do not want to be perceived as what? So that you make sure that you are going to have your actions, not line up with the things that you don't want. So if I don't want to be perceived as weak or perceived as normal or stereotypical, which is things that I don't want, then I'm going to make sure that my behavior isn't going to allow me to be just normal old Mary who's not having an impact on the world. I don't want that to be true. So I got to change my actions. So we've got our ideal, we've got our unshakable, and we've got our unwanted parts of our identity. So this is a really fun exercise. I hope you guys will share. Carrie, you said pushy. Julia, you said weak. Totally. Jesse, you said passionate for your, I'm assuming this is going to be for your unshakable. Passionate, healthy, loving, dependable, unstoppable. So this is like a really powerful exercise to walk yourself through so that you can be more of who you truly are and allow yourself to be seen. And so that you are crafting and curating very intentionally your identity by your terms, not what somebody else hands you, not what somebody else gives you, so that your actions can become consistent with how you define yourself on purpose. So I hope that was a new way of thinking about who you are and gave you some power to sort of like take your identity back in your own hands and to change it, update it, make it work for you versus feeling like you have to keep wearing all these masks to keep up with the identity that people have placed on you or that you've adopted that aren't really true parts of who you are. I have so loved being on with you guys. I have a really, really special Facebook Live show next week. I will tease it throughout the week. So be connected to me through Instagram and here on Facebook so you can get to see what the amazing show is going to be next week. I'm so pumped about it. You don't want to miss it. So go ahead and reserve the spot on your calendar for next week, Wednesday, 1 o'clock Central Time. But if you haven't already, make sure that you go to the link on the top of this page to download your Love Your Body affirmation cheat sheet. You can download this now for free. And this is my step-by-step guide on how to create powerful affirmations that get you what you want, to shift that internal dialogue. And we do this specifically for the body. It's a really beautiful PDF download. You're going to love it. It's totally for free. So go ahead and snag that. But until next week, I hope y'all have a fabulous rest of your week. And just remember, the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. All right, I will see you guys next week.